Bill Gates didn't just scoff at Tesla's Semi's 500-mile range and call it physically impossible to Elon Musk's face. He's also helped fuel a generation of climate alarmism that's terrified kids into skipping families, paralysed policy with doomsday panic, and funneled billions into unproven, potentially catastrophic technology. But truth and solutions are exactly what I want to share with you today as Elon Musk dismantles the climate change hysteria on the All In podcast recently. Yes, CO2 is rising, but it's no near-term extinction event. While Bill Gates sold panic, Elon is engineering his way into building out a sustainable energy future. No hysteria, no lowering of living standards, no draconian net zero policies necessary. This might be the most important conversation to wake those out of decades-long climate hysteria. I'm Will. Welcome to Tesla Jigsaw.
I want to ask if you saw the Bill Gates memo that he put out.
You'd think that someone like Bill Gates, who clearly started a technology company that's one of the biggest companies in the world, you'd think he'd be really quite strong in the sciences. But actually, my at least direct conversations with him, he is not strong in the sciences. This is really surprising. He came to visit me at the Tesla Gigafactory in Austin and was telling me that it's impossible to have a long-range semi-truck. And I was like, well, but we literally have them and you can drive them, and Pepsi is literally using them right now, and you can drive them yourself or send someone. Obviously, Bill Gates not going to drive himself, but you can send a trusted person to drive the truck and verify that it can do the things that we say it's doing. And he's like, no, it doesn't work. And I'm like, okay, I'm kind of stuck there. Then I was like, well, it must be that you disagree with the watt hours per kilogram of the battery pack, so that you must think that perhaps we can't achieve the energy density of the battery pack, or that the watt hours per mile of the truck is too high, and that when you combine those two numbers, the range is low. And so which one of those numbers do you think we have wrong? And what numbers do you think are correct? And he didn't know any of the numbers. And I'm like, well, then doesn't it seem that it's perhaps premature to conclude that a long-range semi cannot work if you do not know the energy density of the battery pack or the energy efficiency of the truck chassis?
Bill Gates clearly showing his lack of critical thinking or open-mindedness despite evidence staring him in the face. Perhaps he should never have been the voice to listen to over climate change either. If you haven't heard, in a 17-page memo released on October 28th, Bill Gates pivoted from his earlier alarmist stance by declaring that climate change, quote, will not lead to humanity's demise, end quote, and urges a strategic shift away from solely curbing emissions towards prioritising adaptation, innovation, and reducing human suffering in the world's poorest regions. Some might say supporting Tesla might be one of the best things to do if the transition to sustainable energy was of interest. Someone fact check me here, but does Bill Gates still have his short position open on Tesla? What despicable hypocrisy betting on and wanting Tesla to fail in their mission, whilst also claiming he cares deeply about the future climate. Perhaps we should listen less to the man responsible for vaccinating cows to slow their farting, I'm not kidding, or pushing solar geoengineering, a radical experiment of spraying sunlight-reflecting aerosols into the stratosphere to artificially cool Earth. Some might say that's a little crazy because it risks irreversible global weather disruption, ozone destruction, and even acid rain. If you think this is a joke, feel free to research any of Bill Gates' insane, dangerous experiments. Personally, I wouldn't trust him to take care of a houseplant, let alone the planet's atmosphere. Let's get back to the nuance of climate change and where we find ourselves today.
He's now taken a 180 on climate.
The reality of the whole climate change thing is that the people who say it doesn't exist at all, and then people who say are super alarmist and saying Rard is going to be underwater in 5 years. And obviously neither of those two positions are true. The reality is you can measure the carbon concentration in the atmosphere. Again, you could just literally buy a CO2 monitor from Amazon. It's like $50. You can measure it yourself. You can say, okay, well, the parts per million of CO2 in the atmosphere has been increasing steadily at 2 to 3 per year. At some point, if you continue to take billions, eventually trillions of tons of carbon from deep underground and transfer it to the atmosphere and oceans, so you transfer it from deep underground into the surface cycle, you will change the chemical constituency of the atmosphere and oceans. You just literally will. Now you can say, to what degree and over what time scale? And the reality is that, in my opinion, is that we've got at least 50 years before it's a serious issue. I don't think we've got 500 years, but we've probably got 50. It's not 5 years. So if you're trying to get to the right order of magnitude of accuracy, I'd say the concern level for climate change is on the order of 50 years. It's definitely not 5, and I think it probably isn't 500.
So that's somewhere between 50 and 500 years to make a meaningful impact on climate. I tell you what, it's a flipping good job we're not heading towards another ice age, because where I'm standing right now, I'd be under approximately 1,000 metres of ice. We'd be burning things 24/7 to affect the climate in that instance, wouldn't we? But seriously, what do you think happens when schools and parents are teaching children that the world is imminently ending? You get many Greta Thunbergs, someone who was no doubt originally fearful of the world burning, so much that she spent her life spreading that unreasonable fear to millions of other children. It's no wonder a proportion of society has seemingly gone mad. Tell a child the world is ending and they'll believe it for the rest of their lives. Children are programmed to believe their parents from a very young age because there's just not enough time to test the theory of whether or not to listen to parents when they say, "Don't go near the cliff edge." Billions of years of natural selection has taken care of those in the gene pool that don't listen to good advice early on. But tell them that the world is ending, that sticks too, until they learn to think critically, that is, and question their beliefs, if of course they ever reach that ability. And as Bill Gates is my example here, he couldn't think critically when the Tesla semi was stood in front of him and Elon Musk was telling him that it travels 500 miles. Bill's head, no, that's not possible. Insane, and a perfect reflection of adults that can't think critically. Doing this to children is fear-based indoctrination, a common climate anxiety critique that is not only being taught to children in schools and at home, but exacerbated by the supposed adults in the room, such as politicians like this one.
The answer is blowing in the wind.
Self-interested folks like Bill Gates and even the former US Vice President and climate activist Al Gore, who predicted in the film An Inconvenient Truth from 2006 that the Arctic would be free of ice by 2014. However, there's still about 4 to 5 million square kilometres as of summer 2025. He predicted imminently that there would be a 20-foot sea level rise, actual 3 to 4 millimetres per year. So that's about a foot by the year 2100. He predicted that hurricanes would be much worse in the long run. It turns out they are no worse whatsoever, according to the NOAA and the IPCC. All failed deadlines. The real inconvenient truth is this. We have all been misled somewhat and need to rationalise our own beliefs and course correct for the truth regarding the climate crisis. Europe's anti-growth mindset, which persists due to heavy regulations, high taxes and strict environmental rules that prioritise emission cuts over economic expansion and people's prosperity, has led to people literally freezing to death in their own homes as they can't afford to put the heating on. This is net zero madness. I'm genuinely embarrassed as to how long it's taken me to realise the insanity of the UK's net zero policy, especially as we contribute just 0.7% of global emissions. 0.7%. Yet here we are, outsourcing all of our high energy industries and manufacturing to other countries. We have massively inflated our energy costs, thankfully scrapped now, but we had the banning of gas boilers in place. But no adequate costly solution to insulate the aged housing stock. If, of course, heat pumps are the only solution. But what did our genius government want to heat our homes with? Hydrogen boilers. All this set in motion thanks to a hastily decided net zero nightmare. It's time we all came clean with this. We have been misinformed, lied to and mistaken. So what's the right course of action here?
So really, the right course of action is actually just the reasonable course of action, which is to lean in the direction of sustainable energy, of a sort of a solar battery future, and generally have the rules of the system lean in that direction. I don't think we need massive subsidies, but then we also shouldn't have massive subsidies for the oil and gas industry. Okay. So the oil and gas industry has massive tax write-offs that they don't even think of as subsidies because these things have been in place for, in some cases, 80 years, but they're not there for other industries. So when you've got special tax conditions that are in one industry and not another industry, I call that a subsidy. Obviously, it is. But they've taken it for granted for so long in oil and gas that they don't think of it as a subsidy. So the right course of action, of course, is to remove, in my opinion, to remove subsidies from all industries. The political reality is that the oil and gas industry is very strong in the Republican Party, but not in the Democratic Party. So you will not see, obviously, even the tiniest subsidy being removed from the oil, gas, and coal industry. In fact, there were some that were added to the oil, gas, and coal industry in the big bill. And there were a massive number of sustainable energy incentives that were removed, some of which I agreed with, by the way. some of the incentives have gone too far. The correct scientific conclusion, in my opinion, and I think one can back this up with solid reasoning, ask Grok, for example, is that we should lean in the direction of moving towards a sustainable energy future. We will eventually run out of oil, gas, and coal to burn anyway. There's a finite amount of that stuff. And we will eventually have to go to something that lasts a long time that is sustainable.
But to your point about the irony of things, it seems to be the case that making energy with solar is cheaper than making energy with some of these carbon-based sources today. And so the irony is it's already working. I mean, the market is moving in that direction. And this notion that we need to kind of force everyone into a model of behavior, it's just naturally going to change. Right. Because we've got better systems. You know, you and others have engineered better systems that make these alternatives cheaper, and therefore they're winning. Like they're actually winning in the market, which is great. But yes. they can't win if there are subsidies to support the old systems, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, by the way, there are actually massive disincentives for solar because China is a massive producer of solar panels. China does an incredible job of solar panel manufacturing, really incredible. Roughly 1.5 terawatts of solar production right now. And they're only using a terawatt per year. But by the way, that's a gigantic number. The average US power consumption is only half a terawatt. So just think about that for a second. China's solar panel production max capacity is 1.5 terawatts per year. US steady state power usage is half a terawatt. To produce 1.5 terawatts a year of solar, you need to add that with batteries, take into account the differences between night and day, the fact that the solar panel is not always pointed directly at the sun, that kind of thing. So you can divide by 5-ish, but that still means that China has the ability to produce solar panels that have a steady state output that is roughly 2/3 that of the entire US economy from all sources, which means that just with solar alone, China can, in 18 months, produce enough solar panels to power the United States, all the electricity of the United States.
China is dominating solar production by controlling over 80% of global manufacturing capacity through massive investments and overcapacity, enabling it to monopolise exports and drive down prices worldwide. Are you listening, UK government? Who knew the positives of domestic manufacturing at scale, as China helped to accelerate the decarbonisation of the planet, boosting economic growth and jobs, enhancing energy security, and even driving overseas benefits such as in Africa, where affordable Chinese solar panels are leapfrogging fossil fuels, powering villages, schools and clinics for the first time, and enabling clean, reliable energy access for millions of people. Yet what do we get in the UK? Send all of our steel manufacturing to other countries who make it with dirtier energy and ship it back across the world in dirty great shipping tankers. Genius, but don't forget that great big green tick of zero emissions. Just imagine if we'd have heavily invested into nuclear energy 10 years ago. Might that have worked?
What do you think about near field solar, aka nuclear?
I'm in favor of make energy from any way you want that isn't like obviously harmful to the environment. Generally, people don't welcome a nuclear reactor in their backyard. If your next door neighbor said, "Hey, I'm selling my house and they're putting a reactor there," the typical homeowner response will be negative. Very few people will embrace a nuclear reactor adjacent to their house. Nonetheless, I do think nuclear is actually very safe. There's sort of scaremongering and propaganda around fission, if you assume you're talking about fission. But fission is actually very safe. They obviously have this on, the Navy, U.S. Navy has this on submarines and aircraft carriers. And I mean, a submarine's a pretty crowded place, and they have a nuclear-powered submarine. So I think fission's fine as an option. The regulatory environment makes it very difficult to actually get that done. And then it is important to appreciate just the sheer magnitude of the power of the sun. The sun is about 99.8% of the mass of the solar system. Then Jupiter is about 0.1%, and then everything else is in the remaining 0.1%, and we are much less than 0.1%. If you burnt all of the mass of the solar system, okay, then the total energy produced by the sun would still round up to 100%. Like if you just burnt Earth, the whole planet, and burnt Jupiter, which is very big and quite challenging to burn, turn Jupiter into a thermonuclear reactor, it wouldn't matter. The sun, compared to the sun is 99.8% of the mass of the solar system, and everything else is in the miscellaneous category. Basically, no matter what you do, total energy produced in our solar system rounds up to 100% from the sun. Maybe that gives some perspective of why solar is really the thing that matters. And as soon as you start thinking about things at sort of a grander scale, like Kardashev scale 2 civilizations, It becomes very, very obvious. It's like, I'm not saying anything that's new, by the way. Anyone who studies physics has known this for a very long time. In fact, Kardashev, I think, was a Russian physicist who came up with this idea, I think, in the 60s, but just as a way to classify civilizations. The Kardashev scale 1 would be you've harnessed most of the energy of the planet. Kardashev scale 2, you've harnessed most of the energy of your sun. Kardashev 3, you've harnessed most of the energy of galaxy. Now, we're only about a few percent of Kardashev scale 1. But as soon as you go to Kardashev scale 2, where you're talking about the power of the sun, you're really just saying everything is solar power. And that the rest is in the noise. The sun produces well over 1 billion times more energy than everything on Earth combined.
It's crazy. It's mind-blowing.
Right.
Yeah, solar's the obvious solution to all this. And yeah.
Like maybe we got a branding issue here.
Yeah, star power.
Instead of solar power, it's starlight, the power of a blazing sun.
But then doesn't your technical challenge become the scalability of manufacturing of those systems? You know, accessing the raw materials and getting them out of the ground of planet Earth to make enough of them to get to that sort of scale and that volume that you're talking about? Do we have an ability to do that with what we have today? Like, can we pull that much material out of the ground?
Yes, solar panels are made of silicon, which is sand, essentially. On the battery side, like iron phosphate, lithium-ion battery cells, to throw out some like interesting factoids here, most people don't know what is Earth made of as measured by mass. Actually, it's iron.
Iron, yeah.
Iron, yeah. We're I think 32% iron, 30% oxygen, and then everything else is in the remaining percentage. We're basically a rusty ball bearing. That's Earth, and with a lot of silicon at the surface in the form of sand. The iron phosphate, so iron phosphate lithium-ion cells, iron, extremely common, most common element on Earth, even in the crust. And then phosphorus is also very common. And then the anode is carbon, but also very common. And then lithium is also very common. There's actually, you can do the math. In fact, we did the math and published the math, but nobody looked at it. It's on the Tesla website that shows that you can completely power Earth with solar panels and batteries, and there's no shortage of anything.
We have all the materials we need here on Earth. We have the technological roadmap to provide sustainable energy in abundance thanks to solar and battery storage. We have the EV revolution, where eventually all vehicles will be indirectly powered from the sun and other renewable energy. And hopefully, as more people wake up to the climate crisis as not quite the life-ending emergency we've been told it is, we might, dare I say, want to tackle more imminent threats to our lives, our freedoms, and the challenges of today. Best leave it there. As always, do share your comments. I'll read them all even if I don't respond to them. I will. This is the Tesla Jigsaw. Thank you, patrons. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.